Started. Josh, what were your thoughts?
So I knew this album because, as I mentioned way back on some episode, that the documentary Amazing Grace about this performance came out last year, the year before. And so I saw the movie, and so I saw a lot of these numbers performed by her and filmed. And I was not as, watching the video, I wasn't as impressed with the singing and the performance as I was listening to this album. I thought the album did a really good job of capturing her sound and her power. And I mean, this is probably like one of the best, as someone who doesn't know gospel music, this is probably one of the best gospel records I've ever heard. It's just like Aretha Unleashed. It's really like, I mean, her roots are in gospel music, and she is singing with all of her heart, and it's really powerful. I also enjoyed the fact that she has the chorus backing her. They do a really good job of complimenting her, and I kind of like a lot of the call and response, or kind of like reinforcement that they give throughout a lot of her numbers on this album. The you get the sense it's also a very good live album. I know we said that it is a live album. You've got many people in the audience, as you can see in the doc, and many celebrities like Mick Jagger was there. I believe it was filmed, the documentary was filmed over 2 nights, I believe, or 2 days. And you have other famous people as well, and just a lot of people, since it was filmed in an actual church in LA, that you get that heightened effect as well. So I really enjoyed the album. It was a little long, but you get the whole breadth of different gospel music, and this is probably the most amazing version of Amazing Grace that you'll ever hear. It's got to be up there in terms of the best performances of that famous song. So check it out for that alone, I would say. And I mean, if you like Aretha, you need to hear this album, because she's on another level, as always.
Okay. Matt, initial thoughts?
So I think this album does a good job of highlighting my overall feelings of gospel, because this album's pretty much, I mean, as opposed to her other albums that we've listened to where there are elements of gospel, this is almost like being at a Sunday, Southern Baptist church service. And I think in the beginning, I liked it. There was some, Mary, Don't You Weep was a song actually that I've heard before, but it sounds totally different here. A little slower. It builds, there's some building there towards the end. I like the way that they did the medley in the second part, kind of bringing the You've Got a Friend, shout out to Carole King, kind of bringing that back, combining it with a song called Precious Lord, Take My Hand. And I think How I Got Over might be my favorite song. So I think that this started strong, but as this album progressed, I found myself liking it less and less, to the point where I just stopped listening to the last song, because I was like, all right, I've had enough. Yeah. And I have to disagree with Josh. The Amazing Grace version, I hated that. That's when I started thinking to myself, I think I hate this album, because this is it. All right, Aretha Franklin's voice is tremendous. It's certainly on display here, and she's doing amazing things with her voice. But that version and other things that she does, and it kind of starts really with that track, with Amazing Grace. But it just got it weared on me so much, because she was just, the way that she was singing, it was almost like showboating her voice, which again is amazing. And I kind of equated it to like a guitarist, like an amazing, rock guitarist, like a Jimi Hendrix or a Clapton, just going off and doing this crazy guitar solo, okay? Like this virtuoso type stuff, which is kind of what she's doing with her voice. But it's, after a while, I don't know, that stuff becomes a little bit, as John uses the word, masturbatory, right? This is just somebody that's just like, doing this because they can. But I don't really derive any pleasure out of it. It's just kind of all over the place. It's not really rooted in the actual melody or the song. So Amazing Grace is a perfect example, because I was really striving to be like, when are they going to get into the actual song? And she was doing parts of it, but just going nuts with her voice, and people in the background, they're totally feeling it. And maybe I would have been feeling it more if I were there in person. But I don't know, man. Gospel is just, it's a hard genre for me to like. I think I like it better when it's inserted into more of a blues, R&B, rock kind of genre in dribs and drabs, which I think we saw a lot of or heard a lot of in the previous Aretha Franklin albums. But when it's out in front like this, particularly for an album that's this long, I found it very tiresome, and I was really ready for this album to be over about halfway through. Like I said, I think I started off okay, but as it kept going, I just found myself liking it less and less and just really becoming disinterested. So very interesting listen for me. I definitely would not want to listen to this again. I would just go back to her other records.
Okay. Well, I'll start by saying, I don't know if you guys realized, but this is a concept album about Jesus. So it's definitely so
Really?
it is definitely a gospel album. Yeah. I can see why it's so influential, because it is almost voyeuristic, but not in a bad way, in that you are creeping into the church that you may not ever go to, but you've heard about, and this gives you sort of the pure heroine version of a gospel. It's like the greatest gospel singer in your church ever, is what Aretha Franklin is in this, with the best choir that a church could have in the background. So I'll start by saying I don't know if Aretha Franklin's voice has sounded any better than on this album. The fact that this is a live album mixed with how she sounds is just remarkable. It really, not that it was a real shock that, boy, that Aretha Franklin, she can sing, but it's one thing when you hear it in a studio. To hear it in a live format, it's just remarkable. And so it's more so than any of the albums we've done. It's an A+ reminder of how good Aretha Franklin is. Gospel is not normally my go-to music. Some of it is because thematically it obviously stays in its lane. And so from a lyrics perspective, it's kind of like when I went to church and you're like, oh, every song's about Jesus. And that is not a knock at all, but you kind of get the gist after a while. And all the way down to, holy, holy, give yourself to Jesus, Lord, take my hand, we have a friend in Jesus, and so it's, you get the theme, right? So on one hand, the lyricism does not resonate with me. On the other hand, the singing and the structure of the songs very much is a huge plus for me. I would argue, like they did, that Matt and Josh did, that the album's a little too long. I think it might have been better as an hour piece as opposed to was it hour 26 or something like that it was?
Yeah, it's long.
And as a result, I would have liked it to be a little bit tighter, 10 minutes. I do recognize, though, that it was a large part of the show. I don't think it was all of the show, but I think it was a large part of the performance. And I also know from many friends that, when you're going to church in the African American community, you are often spending the morning as well as the early afternoon in church. Yeah. And so it's designed to be sort of put on and give you the feeling like you're in church. So I viewed this a little bit as a really interesting slice of life of gospel and a cultural experience in terms of a voyeuristic, in all the good ways, view of what it's like to be in a black church. And from that end of things, I did enjoy it. It's a different dynamic altogether from her studio albums. It's similar to live albums in that when you listen to the Allman Brothers, in a very different context, but it's like you're sitting in the crowd, smoking a J, you know what I mean, listening to the Allman Brothers. And we argued that they went a little bit too long, right? You know what I mean? But it's the same kind of thing. Like, it's designed for you to put it in and get into the headspace and the feel of what it's like to be there. And I think it did a very good job of that. And so as a result, I would give it a slight thumbs up in terms of my overall enjoyment.
Yeah, I would give it a thumbs up also as a curiosity. I mean, I don't know if I would ever listen to the album again, maybe a track or something, but like you said, thematically it's kind of all the same, and it ran it together in my head at some point too after especially towards the back half. Although I like Holy Holy. That's a good song.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was going to say Holy Holy, We Have a Friend in Jesus, and that medley at track number 2 were really the 3 songs that stood out to me. And they're spaced pretty nicely along the way. So, yep. And
yeah,
Matt,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm thumbs down on this. It is too long. Like I said, I like this in smaller doses. The talent is there. It's not about that. And I did go to a black church service once, and it was amazing. It was like I was like, man, these people are feeling it. I mean, it's old school people dressing up, and like they were so nice and welcoming, and it's like, yeah, I could totally see why people would really get into a church service like this. I was raised Catholic. I am not used to I am used to people staring at the ground and like mumbling the prayers and like it's as boring and as you can get. So I get the appeal. It's not for me. I just the end of this album, maybe like I would chop it in half. I wouldn't just say like cut 10-15 minutes off it. I'd say like cut it in half. It's a small dose kind of a thing for me. And like I said, by the
but
end,
you're not the target audience.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. But I'm just. It's my take, and I'm just going. Yeah. But like I said, I stopped. That last song is one of the long ones, and I was like, all right, I'm good. I'm done. I get the picture.
Well,
and,
can I ask?
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Matt? And this probably could go for all of us. Do you think there are certain genres of music that even if we explore their best works, that there's just not going to be a piece from that genre you'll like? Or do you think that there's gems in any genre that you think you can stumble on that you like?
I think that I would probably say that there's gems in every genre. It's got to be hard. I can't just totally write off an entire genre. I think I've tried to do that in the past, and then I've surprised myself by finding something that's like, oh, okay, I kind of like that, So, no, and like I said, there's songs on here that I did like. It was particularly in the beginning. Like I said, I think my biggest issue was that this just kind of went on a little bit too long. And I think I liked the more upbeat, like the clapping the hands and jumping around type of stuff better than the slower kind of stuff. And particularly the stuff where she's just showboating her voice, right? And that's basically what she's doing. And I get why people like it, and it's amazing. But as far as like a pleasurable listening experience, it wore on me very quickly.
Well, it's a little of what like Mariah Carey does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and for that matter, Whitney Houston. Because she also came from the same tradition.
Right, and that's something I've never liked that. So
okay.
that's not just something for a little bit's okay, right? Like if you throw in a little jib or jab there, but when you make it the focus of your song, an amazing, which I felt like what she was doing was something like Amazing Grace. It's like, oh, like I get it, stop it. So, but again, you're right, it's not for me. So, but yeah, that's my issue.
What about you, Josh? Do you think there's just certain genres that are unattainable for you, or do you subscribe to what Matt said that there's something in every genre? You just have to dig harder in some.
Yeah, I think I think there's probably a lot of genres I haven't even heard anything in. So I'm sure there's something I like or that I can tie connections to other things I like. So I'm never gonna discount something entirely. And I can't even think of a genre off the top of my head that I would be reluctant to listen to.
I think I just thought of one, and that would be death metal. I don't think I've ever liked a death metal song.
Well, we're going to do a little bit of death metal in the 80s. So,
yeah. John, what about you? You probably think that you're not going to write off an entire genre.
I'd like to think I wouldn't, but there are some that it's going to be up to this podcast to find me the albums that I wouldn't write off of a genre. In the fairness to the artists and the open mind perspective, I'm not going to come in and lay those out right now, but as we get into them, I will lay my cards down that this is a hard genre, especially if I find myself consistently not liking tracks from a genre and start to realize that I may not be able to find that one. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but I also am big on honesty.
And I'm not saying that to like sound cool or anything. I'm just like, there's tons of songs out there, right, in every genre, and there's got to be at least one that I would probably be like, oh, that's pretty good, right? Or I don't mind that one, So it's just like the number. It's a numbers game, right? So it's if you're saying just one song or just maybe one or two songs, I could probably say I'm sure I could find something. But maybe maybe not. I don't know. Like I said, death metal's a hard sell for me.
Okay.
So.
Well, any other last impressions of Amazing Grace by Aretha Franklin? Okay.
No.
Yeah.
You think it's proper? I mean, it is her 5th highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, but
I think it is properly rated because it is probably, they're considering it to be the greatest gospel album of all time, and probably as a view into gospel, I would argue that it probably is as great a view into traditional gospel as there is, and that's really what being highly rated is about, right? To be the pinnacle of a certain type of music. So
properly rated in Rolling Stone or in Best Ever Albums?
I think it's too low in Best Ever Albums, if for no other reason than the influence, right?
Yeah.
But properly, I mean, you could make a pretty good case that it's properly rated, even if it's because rankings to me aren't just about do I like the album, it's also about the importance of the album. And so if you go off the idea that this is the most important gospel album of all time, then in the early 100s would be where you'd expect to see the best of a genre that had so much influence on R&B and soul to lay. Yeah. All right.
Right on.
Okay.